Alrighty, we have Chapter 7 of School Days According to Humphrey by Betty Birney. Chapter 7 is called A Visitor and a Visit. Chapter 7. The next day was bright and sunny, which I normally like. Last night I had wished for another rainy recess so I could study the new students a little more. But the sunshine helped me think of another verse to write in my notebook. Autumn, oh autumn, when the weather turns funny, one day it's cold and rainy, the next day it's warm and sunny. I don't believe Miss Brisbane thought it was funny when Hurry Up Harry arrived a few minutes after the bell rang. This time, he brought his mom with him. She looked very worried as Miss Brisbane greeted her. Miss Brisbane, I'm so sorry. After your call last night, I promised myself I'd get Harry here on time, but then I had to stop for gas, she explained. Tomorrow, I'll get him here on time. Thanks, Mrs. Ito, Mrs. Brisbane answered politely. Then she turned to Harry. Why don't you go to your seat and take out your language arts book, she said. Og, did you hear that? I squeaked to my neighbor. When Mrs. Ito had left and the students were all working, Mrs. Brisbane called Harry's mom last night to talk to her about him being late. Boing, boing, Og loudly replied, which made some of the kids laugh. That's serious, I said. I hope he wasn't too upset. But when I looked over at Harry, he didn't seem upset at all. The bell rang for recess, later in the morning, and the students rushed out of the room. I knew they'd be getting their wiggles out on the playground, so I decided to try some of those exercises Miss Brisbane had taught us the day before. I wiggled my ears and my whiskers, and I even jiggled my tail, something else that humans cannot do. Then I shook my whole body, trying to shake my problems away. Rockin' Humphrey, I squeaked. I guess I looked a little silly, but I felt good. I felt even better when I heard a familiar voice. Humphrey, what are you doing? I looked up and saw a wonderful sight. Golden Miranda and Speak Up Sae, two of my best friends from last year, were standing by my cage and smiling down on me. I think he's dancing, Sae said in her beautiful soft voice. We miss you so much, Humphrey, Miranda said. I'm sorry, you have George in your class, I squeaked. If only she could understand me. We miss you too, Og, Sae said. George doesn't like you, but we do. Remember, George is that mean big frog. It's not the same without you two, Miranda leaned in very close and whispered. I love you, Humphrey. I was a little worried that Og might feel left out, but Miranda leaned in close to his tank and said, You too, Og. My heart did a little somersault inside. Golden Miranda still loved me, and I loved her back. Girls, Mrs. Wright will be looking for you, Mrs. Brisbane said. She always knows when someone's missing from the playground. They laughed and promised to come see me again. The rest of the day, I tried very hard to concentrate on what the teacher said, but no matter what she said, I kept hearing Miranda's voice saying, I love you, Humphrey. Later, Mrs. Brisbane made an announcement. Class, I'll be taking Humphrey home this weekend, starting next Friday. He'll start going home with different students each week. I was a little bit relieved not to be going home with any of the new students since I didn't know them very well. However, I'm a very curious hamster, so I couldn't help wondering what weekends at their houses would be like. Miss Brisbane lived in a yellow house with her husband, Bert. After an accident last year, Bert was now in a wheelchair. He spent a lot of his time in his workshop making birdhouses. He made a big extension for my cage, too. Thanks. He also worked part-time at Maycrest Manor, a place where people get better after accidents or illnesses. Sometimes he took me there to help. It's pretty quiet at the Brisbane's house, especially compared to some houses, which are filled with kids and pets. Sometimes it's a little too quiet, and I miss Og. I sleep a lot there on the weekends. I nap while Mrs. Brisbane tidies up the house. I sleep while she goes over students' papers, and I snooze while the Brisbanes went out on Sunday morning. I was certainly rested up when Miss Brisbane opened my cage on Sunday afternoon and said, Humphrey, you must be bored to tears. I haven't paid a bit of attention to you this weekend. But that's changing now. She scooped me up and put me into my yellow plastic hamster ball. How about a change of scenery, she asked. It sounded unsqueakably nice to me. She carried me out to the garage where Mr. Brisbane was hammering away at a piece of wood. I thought you might like some company, Miss Brisbane told her husband. Always do, he said. Miss Brisbane sat in an old stuffed chair near the workbench and put my hamster ball on the ground. My hamster ball didn't have flashing lights or music, but I still liked it. Go take a spin, Humphrey, she said. You need the exercise. I started the ball rolling. Things looked different from inside the ball, and they sound different too. When the Brisbanes talked, they sounded as if they were underwater, but I could still hear what they were saying. Bert, may I ask you a personal question, she said. He chuckled. We've been married 30 years, Sue. I think you can ask me anything. Okay. What's the worst thing about being in a wheelchair, she asked. Bert thought for a few seconds. I can't reach that box of candy you hid on the top shelf in the kitchen. Miss Brisbane laughed. I put that there, so I can't reach it either. Then Bert got more serious. People are the worst part of being in a wheelchair. Why? Miss Brisbane asked. Well, I don't like it when people treat me as if I'm different. I'm no different just because I'm sitting in a chair. I'm the same person I always was, he explained. His wife nodded. That's true. And I don't like it when people try to help me when I don't need help, Bert continued. But you can't blame people for wanting to help, Miss Brisbane said. I appreciate help when I need it, and I know I have to ask for help sometimes. But some people just won't leave me alone, like Violet Rasmussen next door. If I am outside for 1 minute, she runs over to see if she can help. She really gets on my nerves. Miss Brisbane laughed. You haven't changed a bit since you've been in that chair, Bert Brisbane. You're as stubborn as ever. It's called independence, he said. Bert began running a piece of sandpaper over a piece of wood. Why do you ask? Oh, there's this girl in my new class, Rosie. She's in a wheelchair, Miss Brisbane said. She's very independent, too. That's good, Bert said. Yes, but she's not the problem. It's another girl, Miss Brisbane said. Something else, Bert, she said. You know how when you were a boy you were really short? Mr. Brisbane smiled. Yep, until 1 year when I went from being the shortest boy in class to the tallest boy in class. It happened over one summer. Quite a change. Which did you like better, being short or being tall? Mr. Brisbane stopped sanding the wood. I guess there were problems either way. That's what I was thinking too, his wife said. Me too, I squeaked, rolling my ball closer to her. Oh, Humphrey, I almost forgot about you, Miss Brisbane laughed. No one could ever forget about Humphrey, Bert said. Humphrey won't be here next weekend, Miss Brisbane said. He'll be going home with a student from the new class. Which one? Mr. Brisbane asked. Yes, which one? I squeaked. I'm not sure yet, Mrs. Brisbane said. We stayed out in the garage for a while, but the Brisbanes talked about other things that I didn't understand. As I rolled around the garage, I tried to imagine Mr. Brisbane as a boy. It was hard. And then I tried to imagine Mrs. Brisbane as a little girl. That didn't work either. Maybe hamsters just don't have good imaginations. Humphrey's rules of school. Everybody has problems, not just you. That's the end of chapter 7. Miss Brisbane's trying to figure out how to help Tall Paul and Small Paul, and how to help Rosie and Holly. Helpful Holly and Rolling Rosie. Chapter 8 is called The Worst Class in the World. I'll read that later. Bye.